Which states have shifted the most on a presidential level since the year 2000? Today on Political Access, we're going to go through each state and see where the biggest political shifts are at. I've already done this for some other years since 2000, so take a look at that if you'd like. So I've got a spreadsheet here, and in this column, this is the Democratic vote in 2000. Here is the Republican vote in 2000, and then here is the Democratic vote in 2020 and the Republican vote in 2020. Then the Democratic shift and the Republican shift. And finally, the last column is the net change between the two shifts. So there's no averages here. It's just 2000 to 2020, and that's it. Now, I understand, like in most elections, there are third-party candidates on the ballot. 2000, it did have Ralph Nader of the Green Party. He was the biggest vote getter, but there are also libertarian candidates and independents on certain states' ballots as well. Ralph Nader did get the most of those third-party candidates. So keep that in mind, as it does play a larger role in some states than others. So let's start here in Alabama. In 2000, Democrats got 41.6% of the vote. Republicans got 56.5%. 20 years later, in 2020, Democrats got 36.6%. Republicans got 62%. Democrats lost 5% of the vote. Republicans gained 5.5%. That is a net gain of 10.5% for the Republicans. Also in this column here on the right, I have the shading. Under a 5-point shift is the light red and blue. A 5% to 9.9% shift are the solid red and blue, and a 10% or more shift are the dark red and blue colors. So the next state is Alaska, and that has shifted a stunning 20.9% toward the Democrats. Back then they only got 27.7% of the vote. The next state is Arizona. That has shifted 6.6% toward the Democrats. We know Arizona used to be a Republican state, but even back in 2000, it wasn't an overwhelmingly Republican state, as it shifted about 6.5 points toward the left. Next, in Arkansas, this has shifted a massive 22.2% toward the Republicans. California, that has shifted 17.4% toward the Democrats. Colorado, that used to be a much redder state, that has shifted 21.9% toward the Democrats. Next state is Connecticut. That shifted a mild 2.5 points toward the Democrats. Delaware, that shifted 5.8% toward the Democrats. Florida, of course, that was the key state back in 2000. Both candidates got 48.8%. Since then, it has shifted 3.3 toward the Republicans. Next in Georgia, that shifted a lot, 12.7 toward the Democrats. Hawaii, that shifted 11.1 toward the Democrats. Next in Idaho, that also shifted toward the Democrats by 8.8. Illinois, that shifted 4.9 toward the left. Indiana, that shifted a very mild 0.4 toward the Republicans. Iowa, that was a shift toward the right, 8.7%. Kansas went 6.1% toward the Democrats. Kentucky, 10.8 toward the Republicans. Down Louisiana, that went 10.9 toward the Republicans. Up in Maine, that went 4 points toward the Democrats. The next state is Maryland, and that shifted 16.8% toward the Democrats. Massachusetts, that got 6.2% more favorable for the Democrats. Michigan, that went 2.4 toward the Republicans. Next state is Minnesota. Of course, they have that long-running track record of voting for the Democrat for president. It was close back in 2000, a little over a 2-point difference between Bush and Gore. Comparing that to 2020, it has shifted 4.7 points toward the Democrats. Down in Mississippi, that actually also went toward the Democrats, but only by 0.4%. Missouri has shifted hard toward the right, 12.1%. Montana went 8.7% toward the Democrats. Nebraska went 9.9% toward the Democrats. Nevada, 5.9% toward the Democrats. And New Hampshire also 6% toward the Democrats. And those states certainly used to be a lot redder than they were in the most recent election. New Jersey was almost exactly the same, only 0.1% toward the Democrats. New Mexico went 10.8% toward the Democrats. New York actually went toward the Republicans, but only by 1.8%. North Carolina went hard toward the Democrats, 11.5%. North Dakota, that went toward the Republicans by 5.7%. The next state is Ohio, and that went 4.6% toward the Republicans. Oklahoma, that took a hard turn toward the right by 11.2%. Next state is Oregon, and that went 15.6% toward the Democrats. Pennsylvania, that shifted 3% toward the Republicans. Rhode Island, that had a nice shift toward the GOP by 8.3%. South Carolina, that actually shifted toward the Democrats by 4.2%. South Dakota had a mild 3.5-point shift toward the Republicans. Tennessee, of course, back in 2000, that was Al Gore's home state, so he did pretty well there, even though he still lost it. Since then, it shifted hard toward the Republicans by 19.3%. Texas, that's gone hard toward the Democrats by 15.7%. Part of that, of course, is George W. Bush was from Texas back in 2000. Utah, that had a big shift toward the Democrats by 20.1%. Vermont had the biggest shift toward the Democrats, that is 25.5%. For a while, Vermont was one of the most Republican states in the country, but at this point, those days were kind of over with, and Vermont is a very solid blue state. Virginia also had a big lurch to the left by 18.2%. Washington, that went 13.7% toward the left. West Virginia, this had the biggest shift out of all the states. It went huge for the Republicans, shifting 32.6%. Wisconsin, very mild shift, a half a point toward the Democrats. That was a very close state even back in 2000. And finally, the last state is Wyoming. It was a red state back then, but it got a little bit redder by 3.2%. So we can do one more thing and take all of this data and apply it to a map. And here it is. The shading is similar. The dark red and blue, those are over 10 points or safe margins. The solid red and blue, those will be likely margins of 5 to 9.9. Lean margins will be 1 to 4.9. Those are the light red and blue. And tilt margins are under 1 point. Those are the very light red and blue shading. So what are the takeaways from this? Well, most of the shifts were toward the Democrats, and most of those shifted by a lot. This wasn't just a 3 or 4 point shift. A lot of these were over double digits. Republicans made a lot of gains in the South, excluding Georgia through North Carolina. And Republicans also had a couple of surprise gains in a place like Rhode Island, and maybe even New York a little bit, but those shifts aren't going to be enough to put those states in play. And of course, again, you got to consider the third-party candidates on the ballot taking away some of the vote from each candidate. But 2000 was a very even election, of course. The electoral vote was almost tied. So comparing it to 2020, it's not going to be a perfect comparison. I understand that. But this was fun to go back through this and actually see where the shifts were. Sometimes you forget how red and blue certain states were 20 years ago. So it's not going to answer everything, but does show you where some meaningful shifts are. Some of those shifts have caused the states to completely flip for the other party. Some of them have made it close. Some of them are still not even close, even with these big shifts. So I thought this was interesting. I hope you enjoyed this as well. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about this data? What do you think about the map? Which states are you most surprised by? Let me know down below. And if you enjoy this channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.